Survival story from one woman named Tanya Kach, who was kidnapped as a teenager, held for a decade as a virtual slave. Well, she's now written a book about that ordeal, Memoir of a Milk Carton Kid.
A young girl peers through a bedroom window. The street outside hums with life, neighbors laughing, cars passing, children playing. But for her, the world might as well be sealed behind concrete. She has been silenced, hidden, erased. No one knows she is there. For nearly a decade, she is forced to live like a ghost in plain sight. Her name fades from the headlines, her photograph grows dusty on missing posters, and those who once searched begin to whisper that perhaps she chose to disappear. But the truth is darker. She didn't vanish into the night. She was taken into the shadows of manipulation, where chains are invisible, yet every bit as binding. Imagine being only 14 years old, convinced that your cries will never be heard, that even if you step outside, no one will believe you are who you claim to be. Imagine a predator so skilled in control that he convinces you your family has abandoned you, that freedom is a trap, and the only safety lies within your captor's walls. This is not the story of a dramatic abduction with flashing lights and strangers lurking in dark alleys. It is the story of a slow, calculated betrayal, one that grew quietly in a place meant to be safe, a school hallway. A place where trust was supposed to protect children, not destroy them. And yet, for 10 long years, she endured her childhood stolen, her milestones erased, her voice buried. Until one day, in the most ordinary of places, she whispered the truth to someone who finally believed her. That whisper shattered the silence and exposed one of the most disturbing cases of manipulation and captivity in modern history. Before we go any further, a warning. What you're about to hear is deeply unsettling. This case involves grooming, exploitation, and a stolen decade of a young girl's life. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. To our new viewers, welcome, and to those returning, thank you. Your support through subscriptions, shares, likes, and comments has allowed us to grow and bring these difficult but necessary stories to light. If you're watching for the first time, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. To our loyal subscribers, know that your engagement ensures survivors' voices are never forgotten. Now, let's step back in time to understand how Tanya's life, once ordinary, filled with the simple concerns of a teenager, was pulled into an unimaginable nightmare. A 14-year-old girl in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, feels the walls of home closing in, desperate for someone to understand her. Tanya Nicole Kach was born on October 14, 1981, in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, an industrial river town outside Pittsburgh, a place where family bonds were supposed to carry young people through the storms of adolescence. But by the time Tanya entered her teenage years, her world at home was anything but steady. She lived with her father, Jerry, and his fiancée. The household was tense, filled with arguments and miscommunication, and Tanya often felt like she was caught in the middle. To her, the walls of that home didn't feel protective, they felt suffocating. At school, things were no easier. Tanya was a student at Cornell Middle School, where she stood out in ways that made her an easy target. She was teased and bullied, and she responded by skipping classes and acting out. Teachers saw a girl falling behind, but underneath, Tanya was struggling with self-esteem and isolation. She wanted to belong, but the voices around her at home and at school made her feel invisible. It was in those vulnerable years that she crossed paths with Thomas Hose, a man nearly 3 decades her senior. Hose wasn't a stranger lurking in an alley. He was a school security guard, a uniformed authority figure whose job was supposed to protect students. To Tanya, He seemed safe, approachable, someone who looked her in the eye when others dismissed her. Hose began small, a kind word in the hallway, jokes that made her laugh. Soon, the attention grew more personal. He gave her small gifts, slipped her cigarettes, and leaned in with flattery, telling her she was special, that he understood her better than anyone else. For a lonely teenager aching to be seen, his words landed like lifelines. But what looked like kindness was in fact calculation. Hose studied her vulnerabilities, sensing her fractured home life, her alienation at school, her hunger for validation. Step by step, he pulled her closer, weaving a net of dependence around her. Tanya didn't realize it then, but the man in the uniform wasn't rescuing her. He was grooming her, carefully planting seeds of manipulation that would soon grow into the walls of a hidden prison.
February 10th, 1996. Tanya leaves her father's home, believing she's escaping teenage misery, unaware she's walking into a prison without bars. It was a cold winter evening in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, when 14-year-old Tanya Kach stepped quietly out of her father's house. She wasn't dragged kicking and screaming into the night. There were no tire tracks in the driveway, no broken locks, no shattered windows to tell a story of violence. To those who would search for her, it would seem as if Tanya had simply disappeared into thin air. But Tanya's departure was not an act of rebellion or a sudden runaway decision. It was the culmination of months of careful manipulation. For weeks, Thomas Hose, the middle school security guard she had come to trust, had been whispering to her that life could be different. He told her she deserved more than the chaos at home, that he could give her stability and love. To a lonely teenager convinced no one understood her, those words carried enormous weight. On that February night, she believed she was leaving behind pain, not stepping into something far worse. Her father noticed her absence almost immediately. Within hours, a missing persons report was filed. Police combed the area, flyers went up, neighbors whispered, but there were no leads, no struggle, no witnesses. Tanya had left without a trace. To the outside world, it looked like another troubled teen had run away. The truth, however, was far more insidious. Tanya had not escaped misery. She had entered a cage disguised as comfort. Once inside Jose's house, the promises of freedom and love dissolved. He led her upstairs, into the confines of his bedroom, and shut the door. From that day forward, Tanya's world shrank to four walls. She was forbidden to leave, forced into silence, hidden away under threats that if she tried to run, no one would believe her. What Jose offered as protection quickly became imprisonment. Tanya was told her family no longer wanted her, that the police weren't looking for her, that the world had moved on. Fear replaced hope, and Jose's control seeped into every corner of her mind. The bright-eyed girl who once dreamed of teenage independence was now a captive in plain sight, living just blocks away from her family, but cut off from everything that once defined her. Meanwhile, in McKeesport, the search grew cold. Weeks turned into months and months into years. People speculated Tanya had run away for good. Some believed she was gone forever. Few imagined the haunting truth, that she was still there, locked away in the same community, her childhood slipping by one stolen day at a time.
March 2006. A convenience store clerk calls police. A missing girl has returned from the shadows after 10 years. For a decade, Tanya Kach lived as a ghost. Her name faded from headlines, her face vanished from posters, and her community resigned itself to rumors of a runaway. But everything changed in the most ordinary of places, a neighborhood convenience store. By early 2006, Thomas Hose had grown complacent. Believing his control over Tanya was unshakable, he allowed her to step cautiously into the outside world under a false identity. At the store, she crossed paths with Joe Spirico, the owner, who quickly noticed her guarded behavior. Unlike the others who had accepted Hose's facade, Joe paid attention. He listened. Piece by piece, Tanya confided in him. She hinted that she hadn't seen her family in years, that she was trapped in a life she didn't choose. Finally, in March 2006, she revealed the full truth. Her name was Tanya Kach, and she had been missing for 10 years. Joe wasted no time. He alerted the authorities. Within hours, the police confirmed what no one dared hope. Tanya was alive. The rescue was swift. Officers arrived and removed Tanya from Hose's home, ending a decade of captivity. Hose, once a school security guard trusted by parents and students, was placed under arrest. The charges were staggering: involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, statutory sexual assault, aggravated indecent assault, corruption of a minor, child endangerment, and interference with custody. But one charge was notably absent: kidnapping. Because Tanya had gone with Hose willingly, albeit under grooming and manipulation, prosecutors could not prove abduction by force.
In 2007, the case reached its legal turning point. Rather than endure a lengthy trial that would have forced Tanya to relive her trauma in open court, Hose entered a guilty plea. The decision spared her from taking the stand, but also meant the courtroom would never hear her full story in her own words. The outcome was clear. Hose was sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison. His guilty plea underscored strategy rather than remorse. No apology was offered, no acknowledgement of the devastating decade he had stolen. The plea secured conviction on multiple counts, but it left the public with an unfinished sense of justice. Prosecutors framed him as a predator who had meticulously groomed a vulnerable teenager, exploiting trust and authority to commit long-term abuse. His defense, limited by the mountain of evidence and Tanya's survival, sought reduced charges through the plea bargain. Ultimately, the law gave him the maximum. Hose served the entire 15-year term, and in 2022, he walked out of prison. Today, he remains on the registry as a convicted sex offender. For the community that once trusted him, Hose's downfall was a chilling reminder. Predators don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they wear uniforms and walk the hallways of schools.
A young woman steps into the daylight after a decade in captivity, free but scarred, her story sparking outrage and resilience in equal measure. When Tanya Kach finally walked free in March 2006, the world she returned to was both familiar and unrecognizable. She was no longer the 14-year-old missing girl from McKeesport, whose face had been printed on flyers. She was a 24-year-old woman, stepping into a life that had carried on without her for 10 long years. Her reunion with her family was emotional, but it was far from simple. Her father, Jerry, had lived with uncertainty and grief, not knowing if his daughter was alive or dead. The moment he saw her again was overwhelming, yet those years of silence left scars that could not be erased overnight. The family had been frozen in grief, and Tanya had to find her place again in a home that had changed as much as she had. The media descended quickly. National news outlets ran the story of the girl held captive for 10 years just blocks from her home. The public was shocked that she had been hidden in plain sight, living in the same community where her disappearance was once headline news. The Tanya Kach case became a chilling reminder of how predators can manipulate without chains, how grooming can silence a victim as effectively as a locked door. But freedom brought its own challenges. Tanya had missed every milestone of her youth: birthdays, graduations, friendships, and rites of passage that marked the journey from girlhood to womanhood. She struggled with trauma, with lost time, and with learning how to live in a world that had moved forward without her. The shadows of captivity lingered: nightmares, anxiety, and the weight of 10 stolen years.
Yet Tanya refused to be defined only by her scars. In 2011, she published her memoir, Memoir of a Milk Carton Kid, sharing her survival story in her own words. The book not only exposed the grooming tactics of Thomas House, but also gave Tanya a platform to reclaim her voice. For survivors of grooming and long-term captivity, her words were a beacon, proof that even after unspeakable trauma, recovery and resilience are possible. Over the years, Tanya has transformed her pain into purpose. She has spoken to schools and organizations, educating parents, teachers, and children about the dangers of grooming and the importance of believing survivors. Her advocacy has turned a story of captivity into a message of prevention and hope. In 2018, Tanya found new beginnings when she married Carl McCrum, a man she met years after her escape. Their marriage marked not just a personal milestone, but a symbolic victory, a chance to build a chapter of life defined by love, choice, and freedom, rather than control. Her story has continued to resonate in popular culture. In 2024, Lifetime released The Girl Locked Upstairs, the Tanya Kach story, dramatizing her decade-long captivity and courageous escape. With Elizabeth Smart, survivor who endured her own high-profile abduction, serving as executive producer, the film underscored the power of survivors telling each other's stories. Tanya's ordeal was no longer just a headline. It became part of a larger conversation about resilience, survival, and justice.
But even as her story inspires, the shadows of the past remain close. When Thomas House was released in 2022, after serving the full 15-year sentence, he returned to the same community. Tanya still lives nearby, now knowing that the man who once stole her childhood is free. Yet despite the unease this brings, Tanya stands as a symbol of courage. She is proof that even after silence, truth can surface. The Tanya Kach story is not only about captivity, it is about survival, healing, and the human spirit's ability to endure. Her voice, once silenced, now echoes with power, a reminder that the missing can be found, and that even after years of darkness, resilience can light the way forward.
Before you click away, remember this. Tanya lost 10 years of her life because no one around her asked the right questions, because too many people looked the other way. Cases like hers don't just disappear when the headlines fade. Somewhere, right now, another child is being groomed, silenced, and hidden in plain sight. If stories like this disturb you, they should, but they should also move you to act. Sharing this video, subscribing, and commenting aren't just about growing a channel. They are about keeping names like Tanya's alive, refusing to let victims vanish into silence again. So I ask you, if you can spend hours scrolling online, can't you spare just a few seconds to hit subscribe, leave a comment, and share this story? For you, it's a click. For survivors, it's a voice. Don't let their pain be forgotten.